Donald Trump's patience with the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin has finally run out. Today, the President of the United States of America canceled his own 50-day deadline that he gave the Russian dictator for a ceasefire with Ukraine and stated that this is too much for Putin. Donald Trump's new deadline is 10 to 12 days. From now on, Trump publicly states that Putin does not want peace and is deceiving everyone and therefore does not deserve the 50 days that were previously given. In addition, Trump hinted that in 12 days things will get very tough for Putin. And today, for the first time, Donald Trump also stated that he no longer has the slightest desire to talk to the Russian dictator Putin. At the same time today, before Donald Trump's statement, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov publicly declared that Russia is effectively declaring war on the entire West and is not ready to abandon its maximalist goals in Ukraine. But what was the turning point in Donald Trump's decision? And so, to get ahead of myself, I'll say that it was not for nothing that Donald Trump invited European leaders to his golf courses. And we talked about this literally a day ago on this YouTube channel. My name is Alexei Pecci. Today is July 28th. Let's go through it all step by step. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, give it a like, write any comment you want, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel. The link is in this video's description. In addition, if you want to support the work of this channel, you can do so with any donation. I would appreciate your support. All the links and details for any platform convenient for you are in the description of this video, or you can use the QR code. So, the President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, has shortened his 50-day deadline that he gave to the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin for a ceasefire with Ukraine. He stated this to journalists during a bilateral meeting with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer. According to Trump, he is now giving Russia 10 or 12 days to resolve the issue with Ukraine, since no progress has been made. Next is a quote from Donald Trump. "I will set a new deadline of about 10 or 12 days, starting from today. There is no reason to wait any longer. It has been 50 days. I wanted to be generous, but we just don't see any progress." Besides, Trump really went after Putin today. And he says that the Russian economy is now in total decline, and Moscow is spending all its money on killing and war, not on development. And that's another statement from Donald Trump. Next, another quote. I never thought this would happen, that Moscow would turn away from peace. I thought we could come to some kind of agreement. And maybe it's still possible, but it's already too late. So I'm disappointed. Russia's economy isn't that big, and it's going through difficulties. Russia has a powerful military, but its economy, once strong, is no longer thriving. It's tough for him right now. Economically, it's not easy. But their economy is quite small, especially compared to the vast territory. This land is enormous. Russia could be incredibly prosperous, but the authorities of the Russian Federation are holding themselves back. At the same time, the United States cannot make economic deals with the Russian Federation as Putin wants. So Russia could be very, very rich right now. Instead, they spend all their money on war. They spend everything on war and killing. It doesn't make any sense to me. I thought that Putin would want to end it quickly. I really believed that it would end. But every time I feel like the end is near, he just kills people. At the same time, Trump clarified that he will announce the exact new deadline either today or tomorrow. And Trump is sure that Putin must make a ceasefire agreement, otherwise the United States president will impose additional tariffs on Russian goods. Although it's obvious that tariffs against Russian goods going to the United States are simply ridiculous, since the total trade turnover between Russia and the United States last year didn't even reach $3 billion. Well, that's why the main focus is not on tariffs against Russia, but on tariffs against the main buyers of Russian oil and gas. And here there are some interesting agreements that Trump has reached in recent days. First of all, let me remind you that Trump promises to introduce 100% tariffs against China, India, and Brazil, and possibly even Turkey, which are the main buyers of Russian oil. And China, India, and Brazil account for about 80% of all Russian energy imports. The Indian government stated a week ago that it would easily be able to diversify its oil supplies. Today, the Russian share in India's total oil imports is about 38%. But before Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, this share did not even reach 2%. And after the Indian government's announcement, the main Indian oil refiners began making trial purchases of Middle Eastern and American oil to prepare for a quick transition and a move away from Russian oil. As for China, it's worth recalling that back in June, after the strikes on Iran, Trump publicly signaled to the Chinese that he would turn a blind eye if China increased its purchases of Iranian oil. Well, if the United States and Iran manage to reach a nuclear agreement, Washington is even ready to facilitate the supply of Iranian oil to the world market, primarily to the Chinese market. Although it's important to understand that China will not completely abandon Russian oil, the United States has already included this point in its overall trade negotiations with China. This was stated by the head of the United States Treasury, Scott Bessent. And third, just yesterday, literally during the announcement of the trade agreement between the United States and the European Union, Trump and Ursula von der Leyen gave such a clear signal. The European Union commits to purchasing American energy resources from the United States of America worth $750 billion over the next 3 years. That is, the United States will now try to simply flood the entire global market with its gas and oil. But there is another very important point. Yesterday, at a press conference with von der Leyen, Trump stated that Europe had agreed to buy an indecently huge amount of American weapons, but he refused to say what sums were involved. He said that they do not plan to disclose such details. Well, in reality, those who have been following the news in recent weeks, probably even just a few days ago, saw a public hint that Trump would shorten his deadline for dictator Putin. Let me remind you, June 22, before Trump's trip to Scotland, the spokesperson for the United States State Department, Tammy Bruce, stated that the 50-day deadline announced by United States President Donald Trump is a window of opportunity for Russia, during which there can be progress on the ceasefire issue. But as she hinted this is not the final period, at that time, Bruce advised to treat the United States President's words cautiously. When he mentions a specific time frame or window of opportunity, because it could mean, quote, any moment within that window. And so, 6 days after the statement by Tammy Bruce, now Trump says that the window of opportunity is closing much earlier than in 50 days. That is, he gives another 10 to 12 days. In addition, today journalists asked Trump if he thinks Putin is lying to him, to which he replied that he just doesn't want to use the word lying. And then a quote from Trump, well, you know, I don't want to use the word lying, but it seemed that, let's say, 3 times we were close to a ceasefire and possibly to complete peace. And you divide it and do whatever is necessary, obviously, to get to the end. And suddenly rockets are flying at Kyiv and other places, and I say, what does all this mean? This has happened too many times and I don't like it. Although it's kind of funny how after that, Trump stated that he doesn't want to impose additional sanctions against Russia because, quote, he loves the Russian people. And let me remind you here, earlier Trump warned Russia about new sanctions if Putin doesn't stop the war against Ukraine. Moscow was given 36 days to make a decision at that time. Against this backdrop, Trump announced plans to introduce 100% secondary tariffs for countries that continue to trade with Russia. And according to the media, these restrictions could affect the export of Russian oil to China, India, Brazil, and possibly Turkey. At the same time, Donald Trump said that if Putin does not agree to meet the deadline and make a peace agreement, it will turn out very badly for Russia. You know, it was actually quite funny to watch how a couple of days ago, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said, listen, there are only 30 days left. Just a little more than Donald Trump's deadline. Well, that's not enough. We won't have enough time to organize a meeting between Putin and Zelensky in that period. We could use a little more time. All these hints, like let's drag this out even further, and then Trump comes out and says, no, we're not going to drag it out. We will shorten all these deadlines instead. And it's also very telling that such a statement from Trump came after his meetings with Europeans, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and United Kingdom Prime Minister Keir Starmer. So does that mean Trump is still coordinating his actions with the Europeans, which is a good sign? But even here, the Russians miscalculated. Because just a few hours before Trump's statement, the head of the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, said that Russia is supposedly fighting against the entire West alone. And unlike in World War II, it has no allies at all. It is the only one on the battlefield against the entire huge West. But still, Lavrov says that Russia is not ready to give up its imperial ideas in the war against Ukraine. And finally, I'll give a short quote from Lavrov. Take a look and judge for yourself the adequacy of Russian society.
We have quite a lot to do. The main thing, of course, is to defeat the enemy. For the first time in history, Russia is fighting alone against the entire West. In World War I and World War II, we had allies. Now we have no allies on the battlefield. That's why we have to rely on ourselves. We can't allow any weakness or softness.
I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments under this episode. Write what you think. Why is Trump suddenly shortening these deadlines? Do you believe that in 10 to 12 days he will really strike hard against Putin? Subscribe to this channel, hit the bell, and like the video. Several more episodes are coming out today, friends. Because today Trump talked about new strikes on Iran and the situation in the Gaza Strip. There was a lot of discussion about the Middle East, China, and more. And all of this will be on my channel today, so if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.